Hannah Kaplan, and this is the WCS Wild Audio Podcast, where you'll find reported audio stories covering the latest news and newsmakers from the Wildlife Conservation Society's Global Conservation Program, Zoos and Aquarium, and their many partners. We've got a great show today, so let's get to it. April 22nd is Earth Day, which could not be a more fitting occasion for conservationists, ministers, and development experts to gather in Bhutan. Hosted by the Royal Govt of Bhutan, under the patronage of Her Majesty the Queen, Jetsun Pema Wangchuck. The goal? To develop a long-term plan for sustainable funding to protect tigers across their range. To understand the stakes and the opportunity, we turn to several representatives of the Global Tiger Conservation Coalition. Nat Moss has this report.
From the turn of the 20th century to 2010, the world's tiger population plummeted from roughly 100,000 individuals to just over 3,000. At the same time, the tiger's range shrank dramatically as the human population expanded. When the tiger conservation community gathered in St. Petersburg, Russia that year to chart a new course, says the World Wildlife Fund's Stuart Chapman, it was a turning point.
In 2010, the tiger conservation and political world came together to talk tigers. Tigers, in terms of their global population, were at an all-time low. And what that summit did in 2010 was set a time-bound target to double the number of tigers in the wild by 2022.
To confront the urgent crisis facing tigers, it would be essential to get a handle on the greatest threats they faced. Ferba Lendup, with the International Union for Conservation of Nature, or IUCN, lays out the key ones.
Generally, I think across the tiger range countries, there are three main challenges that tigers are facing. The first one being habitat loss and fragmentation. Then the next one is poaching and illegal wildlife trade. And the third one is human-wildlife conflict.
In 2010, tiger conservation is focused on protecting so-called source sites, relatively contained areas where tigers were successfully breeding. But tigers need a lot of space. Maintaining a viable tiger population may require anywhere from 500 to 10,000 square kilometers or more. Habitat fragmentation due to roads, development, and other infrastructure, and the loss of corridors through which tigers can access food, water, and mates is a serious problem. But concerns over habitat have been overwhelmed by the threat posed by hunting of tigers for the illegal wildlife trade.
It's fairly interesting. When I first got into conservation, what I was taught in undergraduate and graduate school is it's really all about habitat protection. And that's the most important thing in general for conservation. But I pretty quickly learned radio tracking tigers in Russia, where some roughly 70% of the tigers we collared were killed by poachers. Very quickly learned that for tigers, poaching was by far and away the most important threat, and it still is.
That's John Goodrich with the big cat conservation organization Panthera. Looking to 2022, conservationists had to tackle the threat of poaching to satisfy a demand in body parts for medicinal uses in China and elsewhere, but also the poaching of tiger prey, the availability of which is critical to the persistence of tigers in a given landscape. With great focus and effort, a model began to emerge of how this can be done effectively. One particularly good example can be found in Thailand's Wai Kay Kang Wildlife Sanctuary. Here's WCS's Jube Jornbjoram.
So in Thailand, we recently did not have any record of direct poaching of the tiger, especially in the core area of Western Forest Complex or Hoi Khai Kang and Thung Yai Wildlife Sanctuary. That's because the Thai government has addressed this issue at the site-based level or at the protected area. We implement what we call Smart Patrol, which is the main site-based protection system in those areas.
John Goodrich describes this important new strategy for combating poaching.
We've gotten really good at what we've termed problem-oriented wildlife protection. It comes from the crime science world and policing world, where you dissect the problem, you take it apart, and you figure out different places along the chain of events. So if you're talking about a poacher team going out to kill tigers, they've got to be equipped, they've got to be transported, they've got to be dropped off, they've got to hike into the woods, they've got to establish a camp, set their snares. They catch a tiger, they've got to process it, they've got to take it out of the woods, then it has to be transported and sold. There's this whole chain of events, and you can choose places along that chain of events, preferably before the tiger gets killed, where you can intervene.
The results are impressive. In Thailand, arrest cases almost doubled by using the Smart Patrol alone on the ground. The system is helping law enforcement officers identify the poacher's activities, providing proof that can serve as effective evidence to a court. In India's Manas National Park, Panthera saw similar results, with tiger numbers increasing some 400%. In all, tiger numbers began to inch forward so that by the 2022 IUCN Red List assessment that John Goodrich led, tiger numbers had expanded to roughly 4,500 from 3,200 a decade earlier. By then it had become clear how to control poaching. But controlling poaching alone will only allow us to double the number of wild tigers. To make additional gains, it'll be necessary to repopulate landscapes with functional tiger habitat, but where tigers have gone locally extinct due to poaching. Countries like Cambodia, Laos, and Vietnam. It was with that challenge in mind that the Tiger Conservation Coalition was born. Here's Stuart Chapman.
Our joint vision was already sort of pre-ingrained, which is we all knew what worked for tiger conservation. We all knew what needed to happen for tiger conservation. But let's do it as a joint voice so that when meeting with governments or when meeting with other externals, that we were singing from the same conservation song sheet. And that's what we did.
John Goodrich elaborates.
It was really Stuart Chapman who spearheaded the idea. He sent me an email one day and said, "Hey, I'd love to talk to you about collaborating on tiger conservation." So I said, "Sure, great." And I think he sent emails to other people like Dale McKell and WCS and so on. For the first 10 or 20 years of my career in tiger conservation, NGOs were we viewed each other as competitors. Although we were all, friendly in the bar or whatever, as organizations, we were competitors. We were competing for a very limited pot of funding. We were competing for the best places to work and things like that. And of course, that kind of competition isn't any good at all for conservation. But now Stuart got us all together. It's a paradigm shift for tiger conservation and hopefully a model for other areas of conservation. And we'll see more of this kind of collaboration throughout.
Nevertheless, says Goodrich, the full suite of interventions required for tiger conservation takes resources beyond what has been available.
We need to be better at protecting habitat. We need to be better at recovering corridors, creating and maintaining connectivity. We need to get better at managing human-tiger conflict. We need to get better at making conservation a sustainable thing for local communities. And all of these things cost more money.
The Sustainable Finance for Tiger Landscapes Conference, taking place in Bhutan between April 22nd and 23rd, brings together key constituencies in an effort to mobilize an additional $1 billion over 10 years for tiger conservation. The nation of Bhutan, itself a tiger range country, has led the effort. Again, here's Stuart Chapman.
The host country for this conference is Bhutan, and both Her Majesty and His Majesty, the Queen and King of Bhutan, are involved in this conference. The Queen is actually the patron of the conference. And the Prime Minister of Bhutan has taken a hands-on role in helping to organize this. And both will speak at the conference. And this is really the ultimate platform from which to both attract high-level and interested donors, other governments, civil society. And I think from that launchpad, it's possible to really project our ambitions for sustainable financing forward.
IUCN's Furba Lendup, who grew up in Bhutan, adds that it's also a point of pride for the only nation with a gross national happiness index, a measure with 4 pillars that include environmental conservation, cultural preservation, economic development, and good governance.
Our leadership, our king, the royal family, the government are very interested in conservation, and they have been very supportive in conservation. We were at the forefront of many, conservation areas and very conservation achievements. Our king also has received a number of these conservation awards. So I think it is a very good opportunity for Bhutan to show its conservation work and also to support the rest of the tiger conservation countries.
Maxim Vergacek, a development economist with the United Nations Development Program, adds that the physical setting for the meetings will be especially conducive to making progress.
In Bhutan, when people come in and gather, then they automatically get close to nature and really valuing nature. And that actually makes people a little peace of mind with respect to creating these nature positive models. It takes them one step further.
Maxime and his UNDP colleagues occupy that space where conservation and development finance meet, and that's a critical intersection to be explored in Bhutan.
You have countries with pretty good fiscal space, which means that you actually can talk about debt instruments. You actually can still use the classic instruments of stimulating economies through debt or equity infusion. But at the same time, because of the presence of this fantastic species and the ecology under that species, you have this impact opportunity, which many investors are really looking for these days.
That impact goes beyond protecting tigers, which conservationists like to call an indicator species. Jube Jornburum explains how a healthy tiger population is a sign of the health of the larger ecosystem.
It's really intimate link, between the tiger and the ecosystem, because, the tiger is a keystone species, means that it needs, diverse and large forest area to roam, in which also share their home with many other endangered species. So tigers need a large amount of prey to feed on and need a strong protection to survive. Therefore, the success in conserving tiger population can be a solid indicator that we are successful in saving tiger prey and many other endangered species. And more importantly, saving tiger means that we can save a large forest landscape. Forests regulate for the carbon storage, helping to mitigate the climate change and provide ecosystem services that are important to millions of people. So it's all tied together.
The Bhutan Tiger Conference will be live streamed beginning Monday, April 22nd. Please see our program notes for details or visit the WCS newsroom at newsroom.wcs.org. For WCS Wild Audio, this is Nat Moss.
Today's episode was produced and reported by Nat Moss, with help from Hannah Kaplan and Dan Rosen. The WCS Wild Audio podcast is a production of the Wildlife Conservation Society. Please join us next week for a new episode. And don't forget to rate or review the show wherever you get your podcast.